Okay guys, first and foremost, the unit, it has to be a flexible unit, it has to be portable. If you can't carry it for at least 2 or 3 k's down the river, then you're stuck where everybody else has been and your chance of getting any decent gold, pretty slim. So as you can see, this only weighs probably at the most 15-20 kilos. I can use this almost anywhere, I can walk around, I can jump up and down. This unit can be carried a long way with almost no difficulty at all. Why this will process probably twice as much as your normal high bank. As you can see, it's just a typical rucksack arrangement. It's actually off an army haversack connected with a couple of hockey straps. Undo a couple of hockey straps and the whole unit comes apart. That's all you need to carry the unit with. I'll show you the actual working part of the inside of it, why it actually traps more gold than other high bankers on the market. We'll pull it apart and then I'll show you what you actually need to build one. First of all, you need a classifier. You can run a grizzly bar off the back of it if you like, but grizzly bars, I'll explain to you why they aren't as good as people make them out to be, because they've got narrow bars, flat stones fall in between the narrow bars, or they are nowhere near as good at classifying as a front classifying screen. And we mainly have dual purpose high bankers that will actually trap gemstones and gold at the same time. To actually pull the unit apart, all we've done here, we've got levers and they're just made out of angles, just a little bit of angle, and you push the little angles back as you do with a normal lever arrangement and they just pop out. This one is actually screwed on because this is the actual one that does most of the gold trapping. That's an integral part of what you actually have to have. This is the bit that does 90% of the gold trapping. This is what in actual fact will increase your sluice box, the gold trapping part, by almost 1.5 times, and I'll show you why that actually happens in a second. That's the actual plastic grid, and I'll show you why it's so important to cut this out in a certain configuration. That's the forward grid. Theoretically there should be no gold gets to this part of the box. In all theory there's only gemstones, sapphires, heavier mineralised type rocks will come through here, but no gold. And then of course there's your mat. Now these mats, there is different sorts of mats on the market. You get your miner's moss, some people like it. I don't actually like miner's moss myself. The way that's actually webbed together is too fine. Gold has to get into it and stay into it. These coarser mats, you can get them from your hardware store. We in Australia get them from Bunnings. It's just an outdoor mat, but it's a rubber woven mat. Most of you guys will know what they look like, but they do come in 2 forms. One is a fairly fine woven one. It's nowhere near as good, and what you actually want to look for, you want the coarse one. The coarse one's about 10 mil thick. And once the gold goes into one of these little mats, it never ever comes out. And it actually comes out a lot easier too when you're actually doing your clean out later on. When you turn it upside down and you wobble it from side to side like that, in the water, the gold just falls out and doesn't get stuck inside like some of it does in miner's moss. Alright then guys, what we'll do now, I'll set it up. Before I actually set it up, I'll just show you what we use for a spray bar. There is different configurations in spray bars. Most of them are just PVC with holes drilled in. They do work okay. They don't work anywhere near as good as a slotted spray bar. Reason being, if you have an area like this particular creek, there's quite a bit of moss and quite a bit of weed in it. When that pumps into the ones with the little holes drilled, what happens is the weed actually gets inside and after a while starts to block the holes up. You don't get full spray. With this configuration of a spray bar, what you use is you get yourself an irrigation. There's a few different sort of pipes you can use that are threaded on both ends, and as you can see, I'll just use a different version of one of the other boxes. They are an irrigation riser. They are actually threaded on both ends and they have fittings that fit on both ends. This has just got a stop end on. The opposite end is threaded, and you can use the irrigation fittings to go to whatever pump size you like, and that can go anywhere from probably around about that 1/2 inch mark right up to a 3 inch configuration, and they're completely watertight. But the important part is that you can still move this from side to side. Now you can do that quite easily, and that can then control where you're going to spray. Now in this particular box we have 3 separate holes drilled for 3 different configurations. We usually use the middle one in normal situations, but if you've got the banker close to a vertical face and you're working it, you might want to undo this, move it across to here, It's a 2-second job to actually undo them. You just undo the threaded end cap, pull it out, put it into this side. Put your threaded end cap back on again. Now you're in a situation where you can front feed the box. You can actually throw your material from this side, imagining that there's a cliff face or something behind you here. You can feed it from this direction. Alternatively, you can take it out, put it up this end and feed it from the back end. We find that if you have 3 feeding positions, then you're covering pretty well every situation on the creek. Now what we'll do, these are just cut in with an ordinary saw blade. You can just cut them in with a compound saw or a drop saw, it doesn't really matter. Usually I find around about 1 centimetre apart for each of your slots, and around about a 1.5 centimetre, maybe even up to 2 centimetres, just depending on how strong your pump is the length of the slot you want. This here then will form a spray rather than jets, but it'll be a lot more powerful and it'll deliver a lot more water to your box. This here has to match the actual volume of your pump, but the more water you can put through your box with the least amount of turning your pump up, the better the situation's going to be. Now the thing is though, if you don't have enough water in your box, you're getting to the old situation where you have to turn your box too far or too much of an angle, and you don't want that. Now the 1 to 4 that you usually have and that you usually read about in a high banker or in a river sluice is the slope that they reckon is the optimal for it. It's not necessarily the case. It depends on what you have inside your box as your trapping arrangement. If you only have a small number of lazy L riffles and a piece of carpet in there, yes, it becomes very, very critical. If you have the traps in the right configuration, and if you have enough of the traps, then you can run a lot more water and it's a lot more flexible as to how you actually tilt your box. Now I'll show you through this plastic arrangement that we've got in between the middle part of our riffle section, how we've increased the actual water flow or the gold flow from something that's only around about 1.5 foot to about 2.5 foot. And just by how we've cut the configuration out. I'll show you that as we put it together. Okay, all you guys in Prospecting Australia forum who want to actually build one of these, the materials that you're going to need to do it, I'll show you now. The actual aluminium box, as you can see, is not all that difficult. What you're going to need, I've actually welded the hopper on top of the aluminium box. Critical part is, you want to try to get minimum of about 1 metre up to around about 1200. I like to run around about a 1200 box. We do a lot of work with flower gold. 1200, nothing will get through, and you don't have to empty this box until the end of the day. You will not lose 1 piece of flower gold. Okay guys, I usually fold these up at a taper. I do not run them dead straight like a lot of people do. I actually look at the back of the box. I'll actually taper that from around about the 300 to around about the 250 at the other end, so that you have got a taper running down. Reason for that is that the water speeds up towards the bottom end of the box and clears it a lot easier. If you run it just dead straight all the way through, you're going to lose, because of friction along the side of the box, you will lose water pressure and it tends to block up a bit of the back end. So the taper's not super important, it's a big taper, but you really want to go at least from the front of a box over 1 metre, you want to go at least a couple of inches smaller at the other end. Now, the box itself you will bend up like a normal river sluice box. The hopper itself, I've actually used a welded one. I've welded it on, but you can actually just bend this up, fold it over the edges, and you can actually just pop rivet this on. There's no need to have any welding involved, so that you can actually just do this in your home backyard. You don't have to go and have a special manufacturer actually weld it up for you, and it'll cost you a heap of money. The actual bar that goes across the bottom, into which I put my leg arrangement, you don't have to actually put this is welded on, but again, you can pop it from the inside of the box, put it on, put some pop rivets on the inside of the box, it will hold it just as well and it'll still last you for a lot of years. I've actually put some pipes in through this with a hole saw just to support the legs a little bit better, but that's not really necessary either, because rather than use a narrow piece like I've done here in box channel, you can actually use square box channel. By the time you cut a hole through the square box channel, it'll give you a lot further apart between the walls, and in that case when you put your PVC pipe through, there'll be no wobble. Now when I say no wobble, you want some wobble, that's why I say use PVC pipes. You want this to actually act a little bit like a rocker box at the same time. So in actual fact, every time that you throw a shovel full of dirt into this, you want this to actually move by itself, or we actually quite often will shake them if there's a lot of clay. But I do not believe that you should have a rigid leg. Rigid legs, nowhere near as good as a flexible leg. Then you're only relying on the water pressure and not some sideways movement like a rocker box. So I'll put the thing together now. I'll show you how it is all set up and how it's adjustable. I'll stick it together and then I'll go through why I've used a configuration for the gold trapping that we use in this box. Now guys, super important, this back end of the box, there is no carpet, it's just a skid plate for the gold and the gravel to run onto, just bare aluminium. This here cannot sit right onto the bottom. I'll tell you why that's the case. Now if you come closer, I'll show you what I mean and what I've done in the box. Now inside the box, I've got a piece of aluminium here, which is about a 2mm lip of aluminium angle, which actually holds this configuration together. Now what you do with this, and the reason they work, we set this on top. Now that gives me room underneath this here for fine gravel and sand to actually keep travelling and keep in suspension. I put that over the top of that. I clamp these down. Now when the water rushes down through this box with the gravel from this end of it, it hits this, it does its tumbling arrangement. Because there's water getting in underneath, it actually liquefies all the gravels and the sand that hit this, and the gold, it will slide along the bottom of this, even though there's sand still stuck underneath, it will slide to the bottom of this, to the bottom of the gravel from an early stage. From up here, it'll go through, the gold will actually slide underneath these, and then the gravel will actually work its way across the top into this catching section. Now I'll explain what this catching section does in just a second when I put the legs on. We'll stick a couple of legs into this. Now I'll show you what we've done with the legs. We've just used PVC pipe. You can use electrical conduit, you can use plumbing conduit of any sort. We've actually drilled a series of holes about 1 inch apart. That's what gives you the actual capacity to move the end of the box up and down. This is what actually gives you your adjustment for the sluice box. We have them front and back. And what we actually do, it's fairly simple. We just drop the legs into here. You can use a pin of any sort that you like. Lift it to where you want to get to. Put your pin in. Do the same on the other side. But don't adjust it straight away. Do the same with your back 2 legs. Righto, now you have your box set up. Get yourself at a reasonable, now where I say don't always use your 1 in 4, you're not going to set this box up exactly right until you get your water flow going and get your first shovel of gravel through it. So that's about the angle you want, and that's probably close to your 1 in 4, which your books are going to tell you to have. But as you'll see later on, you can adjust that, and you'll probably change it anywhere from 1 in 3 to 1 in maybe 6 or 7. We have the classifier. Now like I said, I prefer a forward going classifier, a reverse classifier. This in actual fact, this is just electrical cable tray. It's the cheapest, you can get it from any commercial building site, scrap metal yard, but all it is cable tray. They come in different widths. All I've done is I've actually put in the back, as you can see, my back angle here, I have just cut 2 little slots that actually just fold up with a pair of pliers. A couple of little spots for your angles to sit onto, because the rest of it's being supported on top of your box anyway. It goes in, it actually goes over the back of those and just hooks on. By hooking on in the back, that cannot go backwards and forwards. I prefer to classify, like I said, forwards both ways. If you have a classifier that runs to the end, what happens? You get a lot of rocks, because this is a high volume box. This you can shovel anywhere between 6 and 8 cubic metres a day without emptying your box. Now if you can imagine 6 or 8 cubic metres, if it comes to the end of your box and it falls down there, you're forever moving your box backwards, or you're spending a lot of time moving your overburden away. You have to have a little rake of some sort. Now this is just a little scoop that we've made up. It's made up with just a piece of aluminium angle, and it has a little bit of flat bar just stuck on the back, a bit of channel on the back of it, a bit of a rubber handle. It's optional extra, you don't really need it, just a lot better for your arms. Now it has to be smooth enough not to get caught in your classifier holes. What we actually do, we run this with 2 people. One does the raking, one does the actual shoveling in, but you can quite easily take your gravel from your riverbed, you can throw it into it. At the same time, while you're just leaving the shovel there, you can rake it down and rake it to either side. Now by doing this, you're going to end up with 2 piles either side. of your overburden, and those two piles are going to be a fraction of what would normally fall across the front and block the front entrance of your high banker. Now we've got the actual high banker running. As you can see with the spray bar here, there's a lot of water pressure here. It will break up every single bit of clay that you've got. The beauty of this, in compared to having a rear hopper arrangement, is once you throw your clay overburden into it, you can actually rub it backwards and forwards like this. It will break the clay down, wash it super. This is actually, it almost hurts your hands to put in it, so it's actually quite a strong spray, which covers that whole area from there to there. Same as if you would have a PVC pipe with little jets, only believe me, there's a lot more water comes through this than any small jet arrangement around the side. Now, the beauty of it too, by going this way, like I said, you have a grizzly bar at the back. You can throw your shovels of dirt on it, it'll run through the grizzly, and when it runs through the grizzly, if there's anything in the clay, it will just fall out the back of the clay. Here, you can break it down, break it over from both sides to form your two piles on both sides. What I'll do, I'll take the classifier off, and I'll show you what's happening inside the box. What's happened, as you throw your material into the top half of this hopper box, you get your very high flow of water in the back end. You can actually see what's happening to here. What's happening, the sand, the gold is falling out way back in the back of the box. If the gold is shooting along the bottom with the sand running over the top, what happens then, because this is actually raised up, the gold will go underneath that and trap itself in amongst these ripples at the top end. And there is no carpet, there is nothing on the bottom. This is purely gravity that's holding these down. And the fact that you have so many vortexes on the back of this, the vortex created by up to a dozen different little ripples up on here, brings the gold to the bottom. There's nothing that can float across the top of it. So if it does get to the top, then it has to travel a lot of distance through this to even get to this part. This is predominantly for getting your gemstones. This end here has never got gold in it. Now, I'll pull this apart for you guys and I'll just show you what happens in this section here. Why this little section, which traps the flour gold, is the equivalent of a normal lazy L arrangement that actually goes, it expands it from a distance like this to a distance like this. The amount of gold travels 1.5 times this distance before it even gets to here by the way that this is configured. I'll show that to you now. Okay, you fellas from Prospecting Australia, you forum members who want to know why this traps so much of the finer gold that we get at O'Allen Ford, and I'll show you exactly why. The gold has to travel a lot further in this box than it does in your normal lazy L type arrangement where it just follows a straight path. Here we've got a situation, the gold is actually forming a zigzag. It's the same as a river system with the curves of the river. It actually creates vortexes on all the bends, and as you know, gold forms on the inside of a bend. We've created a lot of inside bends in this box, hence the gold traps over a longer period. I'll show you what I mean. If you was to have lazy L ripples through here, what would happen? Your gold would just travel in a uniform over the top of the lazy Ls, but it will only travel that distance over maybe a half a dozen lazy L ripples. Now, if you take the distance of what I've got here, I've got a piece of string with a knot, and I'll show you how long that is. That's as far as it is to the edge of that box. That's the distance in a straight line. Now I'll show you what happens here. What happens, your fine gold is coming in through here. Your heavies will trap, they will trap in any box. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter what configuration you've got, your heavies will stay in the top end. It's your fines and you want to keep. Now, if I can show you what I mean here, as you can see, these have been cut out into form a whole bunch of Zs coming all the way down the box. They have actually been cut out and they form all the way down. Each single one of these forms a Z arrangement. Now what happens, the gold comes over the edge of that, falls into here, trumps in there, comes into this. And now what happens, we've got a scenario where the gold is doing this sort of configuration and it's actually forming itself and bending itself all the way down the box and doing this sort of arrangement. It's just not washing straight, it's actually doing this, and you can see by the bend in the string what's actually happening. I'm making the gold travel a lot further before it gets to the bottom end of this box. Right? Now it comes down to here, then it jumps over. Rightio. Now guys, when I stretch this out, that was the small bit at the other end. Now what happens when I stretch this out now, look how far that gold has travelled. It has travelled from there down to there which is almost another 80% longer that it has actually travelled through the box by just zigzagging the gold through this configuration here. Believe me when I say that this actually traps a lot of the fine gold. You will find, like I said, 80% of it will be up in here. 20% may have travelled to half this distance. The super fine gold will only have travelled to here. You will find when you take the carpet out, no gold has come to this section at the back at all. Now you might ask, if I don't go for gemstones, do I need to make the box as long? No, you don't. If you are going to just make it for gold only, you can stop it at this section here. But doesn't hurt to get a few gemstones while you're out on the gold field. Build your box to trap both, and you might be pleasantly surprised. If you're going to build one of these boxes, make sure that you at least keep that grid section in the center that I've got made from that plastic crate. It's cheap enough to get. Cut it out into the L shapes that I've got into there. If you do that, you can make your box 2/3 smaller, and it'd probably be another 25% lighter. A lot easier for some of the elder fellas to carry around, but look, I'm getting on for 60 and I can still carry this around. So myself, my recommendation, keep your box as long as you can. Okay guys, so the materials you're going to need to build this particular box, I'll start off with the old, the faithful bread crate. Now this has had a piece cut out already for this particular box. This is just a standard bread crate. You can get that from pretty well anywhere. If you can get them, you'll find them lying around all over the place. Now cut this section out of it, but make sure you cut this section when you put it into your box at least 45 degrees. You can go to about 30 degrees. Don't run it so that it runs parallel like lazy L riffles. You really want to have that at an angle so that you can actually increase the amount of distance you've got for your gold to travel. The second thing that you're going to need, cable tray. Now these you can get for pretty well nothing from the rubbish tip. I've used aluminium before with punched holes in it. It bends easy. Cable trays are easy to replace. They're easy to work with tin snips to cut the bits you want out. You can strengthen them with little pieces of aluminium. Simple as to make, but probably the pick of your size that you want for your classifier. They only go around about the 2 cm by 1 cm, so you don't get big items falling into your box, and that's exactly what you want. But I've found over the years, this we've run with all the dredges back in the old days, and we still run that with these high bankers now. So one of those is what you want for your classifier. And the other thing that you need, this you might not be able to access really easy. A lot of people use expanded aluminium mesh. This is, yes, expanded aluminium mesh, but it is not your sloped aluminium mesh. Now this particular mesh, it has vertical sides, and what it actually is, it's roofing access mesh that you find on commercial buildings. It comes in strips about this wide, I think that's around about the 500 mark, but it comes in long lengths. You have to cut this, unfortunately, this way, so the maximum you can have in your box is that width of it. Now the beauty of this, the vortex created by these is a lot better than the vortex with the flattened expanded mesh that you use. This is a lot better to use. You can run this at an angle, and it's a heavier, well, number one, it's a heavier duty mesh than the normal expanded aluminium mesh, and it creates, when you see it running in the box, it actually creates a really good vortex behind all of these riffles here, and you can actually run your box and your water pressure a lot higher with this than you can with the 45-degree expanded mesh. This is easy enough to access if you go to a commercial roofing place. They'll cut you off a piece probably for nothing. If there's any commercial roofing jobs close to where you live, if you go and talk to the roofer, he'll be able to get you a piece of this expanded mesh. But don't use the 45-degree standard expanded mesh. Use the vertical sided one. Like I said, much better vortex added with the water running over this. Gives you a much bigger curl with the water flow going over. Gives you a much better cleaning rate so that your black sand does drop out much faster, and it will trap more gold than your 45-degree standard mesh. Go to the trouble to try and find it. It will make a big difference in the long run on the fine gold. The only thing I haven't got in this little configuration here is the actual mat itself. Get the coarsest rubber woven mat that you can get. If you can't get a coarse one, then use miner's moss for sure, if that's all you can get. But believe me, at the end of the day, the coarse woven mesh will outwork the fine meshes and the miner's moss probably 10 times to 1. Worth the effort, a lot cheaper. You can go to your Bunnings store, pick it up for 20 bucks. You go to a prospecting store and you're going to pay a fair bit of money for miner's moss, and it won't work as well as this coarse stuff does. So if you can, get the coarse woven rubber matting. Okay guys, I'm not going to shovel in. We're just outside our little town where we live in Canberra in the ACT. We're not going to go and shovel from this river because there's no gold in it anyway. but if you want to see how it's actually working on a true situation on the river, go and check out our YouTube videos. We've got a video on Chewina on the log jam. It'll show it being worked. We've got one on the Shellhaven River. That's in New South Wales, Australia, and it actually shows one being worked as well. Thanks, guys.